Today's world is a world of science. As the only gateway to serious knowledge, science wields authority unlike anything else. It enables humanity to cure diseases, fly above the clouds, and network information streams across the globe. Yet, while scientific objectivity performs the most incredible miracles, it sometimes leads us into dead ends. Through the eyes of science, the everyday reality of love, pain, beauty, and sorrow remains impenetrable. In fact, we live our whole life within the blind spot of science. If reality takes place only within the objective world, our lives become tragical illusions. Therefore, we have to grapple with science's inability to make sense of human life. But how can we move beyond the scientific paradigm without a relapse to dogma and fallacy? In this video, we will look at a radically different avenue to reality. Along the track, so the promise goes, our notion of reality will shift, and human existence will appear in a completely new light. Science is predicated on the assumption that human beings are subjects within an objective world. Unlike subjective features, the objective world can be measured and quantified. The characteristics of this reality are therefore stable and definite. But this is not how human reality works. For human reality depends on many factors, such as personal circumstance, perceptions, and the cultural imprint of a person. This is why philosopher Thomas Nagel distinguishes between two types of characteristics: those that change with perspective and those that remain the same. Whether your everyday commute is long or not is a matter of perspective. Thus, it is a subjective statement. Declaring that this distance amounts to 35 miles, however, does not require a perspective. Therefore, the latter counts as an objective statement. So, objectivity seems to work by excluding the sense of perspective. Nagel consequently calls this concept the view from nowhere. This notion can be illustrated by looking at colors. Imagine two people are looking at the same color spot and cannot agree whether it is blue or purple. With the view from nowhere, this dispute is settled. The spot emits a wavelength of 435 nanometers. This is a statement of objective validity and without perspective. In this way, the world can be mapped in terms of data, structures, and shapes. The Earth revolves around the Sun at a speed of 107,000 kilometers per hour. The room temperature is 20 degrees Celsius. The Eiffel Tower stands 300 meters high. The view from nowhere discovers the world as matter, which in turn provides absolute properties: force, motion, place, and time. Now we get facts that have the great advantage of being situation independent and precise. Science opens up the world as an a priori before any experience. And doesn't this exclusion of human experience reveal how the world really is? Here, we have reached the crux of the matter. When we look at something from the view from nowhere, we address the object of study in a very specific way. In doing so, we play a game. We ask ourselves the question, what does our object look like when we remove ourselves from the equation? Before we enter the science lab, we take off our jacket and put on a smock. As we push open the lab door, our jacket is left behind in the cloakroom, and together with it, everything that has meaning and significance for us. Color, aspiration, pain, beauty. They are all replaced by abstracts like torque, coordinate point, and degrees Celsius. Because we assume that there's an objective world out there which is concealed behind all of the subjective features we bring to the table. So by removing ourselves from the equation, we finally see the world in its real form. Ironically, however, this objective approach also changes our object of investigation. Because reality is a strange place. It does not seem to be a definite entity. Rather, it resembles a prism. Whatever you get out of reality is dependent on the angle you take. Approached from the view from nowhere, reality splits in half and we get a subject-object separation. In an objective world, the subject is subordinate to the object. Human reality is therefore degraded to a mere appearance behind which the real gears are working. As defective subjects, we are separated from the true world of objects. In short, we have locked ourselves out epistemologically. What we experience are only subjective echoes of an objective world. Depression becomes a mismatch of neurological messengers. A dream, the waste product of neurological background noise, and one's own meaningful life, a trivial breath within the history of the universe, in an ordinary galaxy on an insignificant planet. But these facts are a sharp contrast to our reality. The depressive person does not think of his situation as a mismatch of neurotransmitters. Our lives don't feel meaningless and unimportant most of the time. Whatever reality science is describing, it certainly is not human reality. The scientific space does not sound like the place we inhabit. Because human life is not a scientific enterprise. So, when it comes to the human condition, the view from nowhere won't get us very far. We view life from a concrete point of view. And it is from this angle that reality unfolds for human beings. Therefore, we need an alternative approach. But is there a take on reality that appreciates our lived experience? A promising candidate for this is phenomenology. Phenomenology is the study of structures of consciousness as experienced from the first-person point of view. Let us refer again to the example of the color stain from the perspective of the view from nowhere. The stain emits a wavelength of 435 nanometers. In this statement, the blue is reduced from a discrete color phenomenon to the mere appearance of a certain vibration. The piece of reality we see might appear to be a blue spot, but actually it is a vibrating pattern. The phenomenologists, however, don't think that the term blue is subjectively layered on top of the objective wavelength. Rather, it is the other way around. The blue stain is a primary part of reality. The description of the stain as an object of wavelength, instead, is a secondary derivation from the real thing. The same applies to time. Whether we stand in the checkout queue for 5 minutes or wait 5 minutes for the doctor to tell us the results of our mother's surgery. From the view from nowhere, there is no difference. But phenomenologically, there are worlds in between. The claim of phenomenology is this: if we want to understand things, we must use the approach to the world that is most natural to us. Consequently, we cannot simply take ourselves out of the equation. Humans evolved to see meanings, not objects. By seeing meanings, we managed to survive as a species. Perceiving the world within the dichotomy of subject and object is a relatively new idea. It is rather an artifice that scientists place on top of our intrinsically meaningful reality. Thus, if we want to make sense of our condition, we have to refer to the human nexus of existence. If we do so, we get interesting results. While the view from nowhere produces facts, phenomenology sheds light on involvements, matters, and systems of relatedness. These make up the framework of the human condition we cannot escape. They are deeply inscribed into the bones of existence and cannot be regarded as subjective properties separate from us or reality. This is a really useful way of thinking about reality. Your whole life, you don't interact with objects, but with matters instead. Just as objects make up the room of scientific inquiry, matters make up the sphere of human existence. We see the contrast between these two modes of conceptualization all the time when it comes to technology. Surely, science sets the course for engineers to craft a useful piece of technology. They make use of the view from nowhere to create a technological tool. Then, they proudly pronounce what they have crafted and explain it in scientific terms. Some of them will even make bold assumptions about how it can be used. But, in fact, they don't have the faintest idea of what it is that they created, because they cannot understand their own creation until it unfolds within the realms of involvement, matter, and system of relatedness. When you look at early statements about YouTube, Facebook, cell phones, or television, you will see that nobody had a clue as to what these innovations meant. They were completely different technologies 15 years ago because they were embedded in quite different systems of relatedness. As we see, human reality cannot be understood by excluding ourselves from the equation. On the contrary, reality manifests itself only in relation to the human being. This circumstance dissolves the artificial separation between subject and object, and, as a consequence, the world again becomes an integral part of our being. Or, in other words, the world becomes the environment. The hammer is not a distinct object, but becomes part of a human involvement as a tool. The place of human experience is restored, and man and world are reunited again. So, what does this mean in practical terms? Well, first of all, it changes our perspective on science. Before, scientists were diligent adherents of truth, facts, and logic. They carefully unveiled the mechanisms of reality, while the rest of us dwelt in their all too modest human illusion. But now, the whole conception has changed. Science is not a sovereign enterprise of truth anymore. Scientists rather resemble clever magicians who alter the ontological status of reality to derive a very special set of traits from it. Insanely useful, no question about it. But it is quite a bold move to refer to these technical results as reality. When we remove this entitlement to truth from science and understand it as a useful tool instead, the image of ourself changes. It frees us from the unfortunate misconception that we are only limited onlookers of reality. Instead, we learn what we have always felt, that we are at reality's center. And much more, that science, while being a useful tool, cannot claim superior access to the real world. We realize that reality is our birthright and therefore is fully accessible to us. The reality of involvements, matters, and systems of relatedness. We access this world in form of experience, culture, art, and thought. Our conception of reality expands. There are now linguistic realities, narrative, symbolic, and musical realities. There are sexual and mythological realities, and none is of secondary validity compared to scientific truth. Quite the contrary, these realities seem to be more real than anything else.